Commander Mira Solon watched as the last supply ship exploded in Kalin 5's atmosphere, bright orange flames dissolving into the reddish sky. The observation deck's reinforced glass darkened automatically to protect her eyes, but the damage was already done, not to her vision, but to the colony's last hope. "That was our final resupply," she said, her voice steady, despite the churning in her stomach. Zyrev forces have sealed the blockade. Behind her, Engineer Talon Kor nodded grimly, his weathered face reflecting in the glass. His fingers tapped nervously against the console, calling up damage reports from across the settlement. "They've cut the main power grid. Secondary systems are holding, but barely. We've got maybe 72 hours before life support becomes critical." Mira turned away from the viewport, surveying the small command center buried beneath a kilometer of red rock. 6 days of siege had transformed the once pristine facility into a desperate last stand. Screens flickered with intermittent power, and the air recyclers struggled to keep up with the overcrowding as more civilians sought shelter underground. "What about our distress signal?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Talon's expression said everything. "Still broadcasting, but—" he hesitated. "There's been no response. Not from Alliance outposts, not from passing merchant ships, not from anyone." Mira nodded, unsurprised. Kalin 5 sat at the edge of human expansion, a mining outpost established for its rich veins of Detonium ore. The planet's location made it valuable and vulnerable. When the Zyrev forces had appeared 6 days ago, demanding immediate surrender and resource rights, the colony's 12,000 inhabitants had found themselves suddenly very alone in the vastness of space. "Keep broadcasting," she ordered. "Boost power to the array. Take it from non-essential systems if necessary." "Which systems are still non-essential?" Talon asked with a bitter laugh. "We're running on emergency protocols already." Mira didn't answer. Instead, moving to the central holotable, where a 3-dimensional map of the settlement pulsed with warning indicators. Red dots represented Zyrev positions, steadily encroaching on the blue perimeter of human defenses. The mining colony had never been designed for warfare. Its modest security force was meant to handle claim jumpers and occasional raiders, not a full military assault. "Commander," a young voice broke her concentration. Private J. Miro stood at attention near the entrance, though his uniform was stained with dust and sweat. At 22, he was the youngest member of the colony's security detail, with bright eyes now dimmed by exhaustion. "The civilians in Sector 4 are asking about evacuation options." "There are no evacuation options," Mira said quietly. "Make sure they understand that. We can't outrun orbital bombardment." Jay hesitated. "Some of them are suggesting surrender." The word hung in the air. Neither accusation nor recommendation, simply a statement of growing sentiment. Mira had expected it. 6 days of dwindling supplies and increasing casualties had worn down morale faster than the Zyrev had worn down their defenses. "Tell them," she said carefully, "that the Zyrev don't take prisoners. They take resources. And on this planet, we are the resources." She'd seen the intelligence reports from other colonies that had surrendered to Zyrev demands. The systematic extraction of labor, the harvesting of biological materials, the slow depletion of human life to fuel Zyrev expansion. Jay nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. "Yes, Commander. I'll explain." He turned to leave, then paused. "Commander, do you really think anyone's coming for us?" The question pierced through Mira's carefully maintained facade. Did she believe help was coming? The rational part of her mind screamed no. Kalin 5 was too far, too insignificant, too easily written off as a regrettable loss. But the part of her that had risen through the ranks of colonial security, the part that had sworn to protect these people, that part couldn't afford to surrender to despair. "Keep broadcasting," she repeated, not answering his question directly. That's an order. Private. After Jay left, Mira turned back to Talon. I need you at the comm station. If there's any way to boost that signal further, find it. The engineer nodded, already moving toward the exit. What about you? I'm going topside, Mira said, checking the charge on her sidearm. I need to see what we're dealing with. You mean you need to give them hope, Talon said knowingly. Mira allowed herself a small smile. That too. The surface level of Kalin 5's main settlement had once been a promising frontier town, with modular buildings arranged in concentric rings around the central mining operations. Now, as Mira emerged from the underground bunker, she saw only devastation. The outer rings had been reduced to rubble during the initial assault, and even the sturdier inner structures showed signs of damage from precision strikes. The artificial atmospheric shield still functioned, creating a breathable bubble over the settlement. But Mira could see where Zyrev bombardment had tested its limits. Beyond the shield's faint blue shimmer, the natural atmosphere of Kalin 5, thin and laden with toxic particulates, swirled in reddish clouds. The colony survived by the narrowest of margins. Commander! Security Chief Ren Valan approached, his armor scuffed and dented from recent fighting. We've spotted Zyrev ground forces gathering near the eastern perimeter. Looks like they're preparing for another push. Mira nodded, scanning the horizon where the shield met the rocky terrain. How many? More than last time. Maybe 200. They've brought excavation equipment. That was worrying. The underground bunkers were the colony's last defense. If the Zyrev breached those, there would be nowhere left to retreat. Redistribute our forces, she ordered. Reinforce the eastern tunnels, but don't leave the other entry points vulnerable. They've used diversionary tactics before. We're spread thin as it is, Ren warned. The civilians who volunteered are holding positions, but they're not soldiers. They're fighting for their homes, Mira said. Sometimes that's worth more than training. She knew it was a platitude, but it was also the only card they had left to play. What about the communications array? Ren's expression darkened. Direct hit an hour ago. Talon's team is trying to restore function, but it's not looking good. Mira felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Without the array, their distress signal, already a desperate shot in the dark, would fade to nothing. They would truly be alone. Take me there, she said. The communications array stood on the settlement's highest point. A cluster of dishes and antennas rising from the red rock like metallic flowers. Or they had, before Zyrev precision strikes reduced most of them to twisted metal. As Mira climbed the maintenance ladder to the platform, she saw Talon and 3 technicians working frantically amid the wreckage. Tell me we can fix this, she said as she reached them. Talon looked up, his face streaked with soot and perspiration. Define fix, he said grimly. We've jury-rigged a narrowband transmitter, but its range is maybe 1/10 of what we had before, and it's pulling power we can't afford to spare. Mira surveyed the damaged equipment. Keep it running, she said. As long as we have power, we keep broadcasting. Even if no one's listening, one of the technicians asked, voice cracking with fatigue. Especially then, Mira replied, because that's when we need to shout louder. A distant rumble shook the platform beneath their feet, and Mira turned to see a plume of dust rising from the eastern perimeter. The Zyrev attack had begun. Get this array functioning, she ordered, already moving toward the ladder. That's your only priority. As she descended, her communicator crackled to life. Commander, Ren's voice came through, punctuated by static and the sound of weapons fire. They've breached the outer defense line. We need reinforcements at Junction E7. On my way, Mira responded, breaking into a run as her boots hit the ground. The eastern tunnels were a maze of mining shafts repurposed as defensive positions, and the sound of battle echoed through the narrow passages as Mira approached. She found Ren coordinating a desperate stand at a reinforced barrier. Civilians and security personnel alike firing at Zyrev forces, pushing through a partially collapsed section. The Zyrev were humanoid in basic shape, but distinctly alien, taller, with mottled gray skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their environmental suits enhanced their already considerable strength, and their weapons cut through the makeshift barricades with alarming efficiency. "Fall back to position E9, Mira ordered, assessing the situation quickly. "We can't hold here. If we fall back further, they'll have access to the residential tunnels," Ren argued, firing a burst from his rifle that temporarily drove back an advancing Zyrev soldier. "If we stay here, we'll all die," Mira countered. "E9 has automated defenses we can activate. That gives us a better chance." Ren nodded reluctantly. "Everyone, controlled withdrawal to E9, he called out. "Cover fire in sequence, go." The defenders began their retreat, moving in practice groups, while others provided covering fire. Mira stayed until the last squad was moving, then fell in behind them, her sidearm raised toward the advancing enemy. They had nearly reached the fallback position when a deafening explosion rocked the tunnel. The ceiling collapsed 30 meters ahead, cutting off their escape route in a cloud of choking dust and debris. "Alternative route!" Mira shouted over the ringing in her ears. "Maintenance shaft 12, move!" They changed direction, hurrying down a narrower passage as the sounds of Zyrev forces grew closer behind them. The maintenance shaft would take them on a longer route to safety, but it was their only option now. As they ran, Mira's communicator sparked to life again. "Commander!" Talon's voice came through, breathless with excitement. "The array. We've got it working at full capacity. Signals broadcasting clear." A flicker of hope warmed Mira's chest, but she pushed it aside. They still needed to survive the immediate threat. "Good work," she responded. "Now get your team to safety. Zyrev forces have breached the eastern tunnels." "Already moving," Talon confirmed. "But Commander, there's something else. We're picking up anomalous readings in high orbit. Something big just dropped out of FTL." Mira's steps faltered for just a moment. "Zyrev reinforcements?" "I don't think so," Talon said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "The energy signature doesn't match their drive systems. It's different." "Keep me updated," Mira ordered, pushing forward again as the tunnel began to slope upward toward the central bunker complex. They had almost reached the secure doors when a series of explosions shook the entire settlement. For a terrifying moment, Mira thought the Zyrev had begun orbital bombardment, a final solution to the colony's resistance. But the pattern was wrong. The impacts seemed to be happening far above them. The security team and civilians crowded into the central bunker, sealing the reinforced doors behind them. Inside, the command center buzzed with frantic activity as operators tried to make sense of the sudden change in the battle. "Get me visual," Mira ordered, striding to the main display. The screen flickered, then stabilized on an orbital view captured by the settlement's few remaining satellites. What Mira saw made her breath catch in her throat. A massive warship had appeared in Kalin 5's orbit, its sleek black hull adorned with the unmistakable insignia of the human vanguard, the deep space military arm of the Alliance. And it was engaging the Zyrev blockade with devastating effect, cutting through their smaller vessels with precision weapons fire. "They came," Jay whispered beside her, his voice tinged with disbelief. Someone actually came. Mira couldn't tear her eyes from the screen as the human vanguard ship, easily 5 times the size of the largest Zyrev vessel, methodically dismantled the blockade. Escape pods jettisoned from damaged Zyrev ships, and frantic communications chatter filled the airwaves as the invaders found themselves suddenly on the defensive. "The ground forces are pulling back," Ren reported, monitoring tactical displays. "They're trying to reach their landing craft." "Don't let them," Mira said, her shock giving way to fierce determination. Seal all surface exits. Force them deeper into the tunnels, where they can't signal for extraction. As the defenders rushed to comply, Talon appeared at Mira's side, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and elation. "The Vanguard ship is hailing us," he said. "They're requesting landing coordinates for ground support teams." Mira nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. The tide had turned so suddenly that she could barely process it. "Direct them to landing pad Alpha," she decided. "And Talon, thank you for keeping that signal broadcasting." The engineer managed a tired smile. "Just doing my job, Commander." "We all did," Mira said, looking around at the haggard faces of her people, seeing hope beginning to replace resignation in their eyes. "And we're not finished yet." High above Kalin 5, aboard the Zyrev command vessel, General Vrax watched with mounting fury as his carefully planned operation disintegrated. The tactical display before him showed the systematic destruction of his blockade fleet, ship after ship falling to the unexpected human warship that had somehow appeared without warning. "How did they get past our sensor net?" he demanded, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. "Where did they come from?" His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Krell, stood rigidly at attention, knowing that failure often meant death in Zyrev hierarchy. "Unknown, General. Their vessel appears to use advanced stealth technology. We detected no approach vector." Vrax's elongated fingers tightened on the command chair's armrests. "And their capabilities. Significantly beyond our present forces," Krell admitted reluctantly. "Their weapon systems are penetrating our shields with minimal effort. We've lost 60% of our orbital capacity." The general absorbed this information with cold calculation. The Kalin 5 operation had been planned as a simple resource acquisition, a human mining colony, isolated and vulnerable, with valuable deutonium deposits and a manageable population for labor extraction. The modest defensive force he'd brought should have been more than sufficient. The appearance of a human Vanguard warship changed everything. The Vanguard represented the elite of human military power, rarely seen outside core alliance territories. Their presence here, at the fringes of human expansion, was unprecedented. "Order all ground forces to withdraw," Vrax decided. "Priority extraction for specialized units and command personnel." "And the main force?" Krell asked carefully. Vrax's lipless mouth tightened in what passed for a Zyrev smile. "They will create a diversion, set charges at their positions, and activate their neural transmitters. Full combat stimulant release." Krell hesitated. "That will burn out their neural systems within hours." "General." "They are already lost assets," Vrax said dismissively. "Let them die serving a purpose." As Krell moved to relay the orders, a violent impact rocked the command vessel. Warning indicators flashed across the tactical display as shields failed along the starboard quarter. "Direct hit to propulsion systems," a technician reported. "Drive capability reduced to 40%. Vrax rose from his command chair, his tall frame unfolding to its full height. "Prepare my shuttle," he ordered, "and initiate self-destruct protocols on all compromised vessels. The humans will gain nothing from this encounter." As subordinates rushed to comply, Vrax stared at the image of the human warship displayed on the main screen. Its design was oddly beautiful in its menace, sleek and purposeful, without the biological elements that characterized Zyrev vessels. How had they responded so quickly to a distress call from this insignificant outpost? Why commit such valuable military resources to protect a minor mining colony? The humans remained frustratingly unpredictable, even after decades of careful study. They defended positions of minimal strategic value with the same ferocity as their core worlds. They formed alliances based on abstract principles rather than clear resource advantage. They sacrificed individual survival for collective benefit in ways that defied rational analysis. As his shuttle prepared for departure, Vrax made a mental note to recommend a thorough reassessment of human expansion patterns. The Zyrev Dominion had miscalculated here, and such errors could not be tolerated if they were to continue their necessary consumption of resources across this sector. The human phrase came unbidden to his mind, gleaned from intercepted communications during previous encounters. They poked the wrong bear. Vrax did not fully understand the reference, but he grasped its essential meaning. The Zyrev had miscalculated their prey's response, and now they would pay the price. As his shuttle launched, accelerating away from the doomed command vessel, Vrax watched dispassionately as the first of his ships detonated in a brilliant flash of light, denying the humans any chance to salvage Zyrev technology. It was a small victory in a significant defeat. The shuttle's navigational system plotted a course to the nearest Zyrev outpost. Far from this unexpectedly costly battlefield, Vrax would survive to fight another day, and to ensure that the next encounter with humans would end very differently. Back on Kalen 5's surface, Mira stood at the edge of Landing Pad Alpha, watching as the human Vanguard dropships descended through the artificial atmosphere. The massive craft settled onto the landing pad with surprising grace, their engines cycling down as deployment ramps extended. Armored soldiers emerged first, their powered combat suits bearing the same insignia as their mothership. They moved with practiced precision, establishing a perimeter around the landing zone with weapons at ready, not pointed at the colonists, but outward, protecting them. Following the soldiers came medical teams and technical specialists, already unloading supplies and equipment. Mira had requested emergency medical support as the highest priority. 6 days of siege had left many wounded, and the colony's medical facilities were overwhelmed. The last figure to emerge from the lead dropship stood out immediately, tall and commanding, wearing the distinctive charcoal gray uniform of Vanguard Command. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. As he approached Mira, she noted the 4 gold bands on his sleeve, marking him as a general. "Commander Solon?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. Mira straightened to attention. "Yes, sir. Commander Mira Solon, Kalen 5 Colonial Security." The man extended his hand. "General Arik Lorne, Human Vanguard 7th Fleet. We received your distress call." Mira accepted the handshake, noting the firm grip and the calculating intelligence in the general's eyes. "Your timing is impeccable. General, another day, maybe less, and there wouldn't have been anyone left to save." Lorne nodded grimly. "We came as soon as we detected your signal. The Zyrev blockade was jamming standard communications channels, but your engineers' modifications to the array created a pulse we could track." He glanced at the devastation visible beyond the landing pad. "What's your situation?" "Critical but stabilizing now that you're here," Mira reported. "We have approximately 12,000 colonists, 1,700 wounded, major damage to infrastructure, and Zyrev ground forces still present in the Eastern Tunnel complex." "My troops will handle the remaining Zyrev," Lorne assured her. "We've tracked their withdrawal attempts, but our orbital forces have prevented any significant evacuation." As they spoke, medical teams were already moving into the settlement, directed by colonial personnel toward the most urgent cases. Supply crates labeled with the Alliance insignia were being unloaded and distributed. Food, medicine, power cells, all the essentials that had dwindled to dangerous levels during the siege. "Commander," Talon approached, pausing to nod respectfully to General Lorne. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from the eastern tunnels. It looks like the Zyrev forces are activating some kind of devices." Lorne's expression hardened. "Demolition charges, most likely. Standard Zyrev procedure when forced to retreat. Destroy what they can't take." "There are civilians sheltering in adjacent sections," Mira said, alarm sharpening her voice. "If those tunnels collapse—" "We have countermeasures," Lorne interrupted, already activating his communication device. "Captain Vega, deploy EMP drones to the eastern complex immediately. Suppress all Zyrev technology." Within minutes, Small, unmanned drones launched from the Vanguard dropships, streaking toward the eastern section of the settlement. Mira watched on a portable tactical display as the drones penetrated the tunnel entrances and released concentrated electromagnetic pulses. "That should disable their detonators," Lorne explained. "And any Zyrev still in environmental suits will find their systems compromised. My teams can move in safely now." Mira studied the general with new appreciation. The human Vanguard's reputation for effectiveness was well-deserved. It seemed. "Thank you, General. I have to ask, though, why did you come? Kalen 5 is hardly a strategic priority." Lorne's expression softened slightly. "The Alliance doesn't measure human lives in terms of strategic value. Commander, every colony, every outpost, every ship flying our flag has the same guarantee. Call for help, and we will answer." He gestured toward the sky, where the massive silhouette of his warship was visible through the atmospheric shield. "That's what the Vanguard exists for." The sentiment seemed almost naive in its idealism. Yet the evidence of that commitment stood before her. A fleet general leading a rescue mission to a remote mining colony, bringing the full might of humanity's most advanced warship against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable just hours ago. "Your colony transmitted a signal despite overwhelming odds," Lorne continued. "You kept fighting when surrender might have seemed reasonable. The Alliance rewards that kind of determination." A sudden commotion drew their attention. A group of Vanguard soldiers was escorting several Zyrev prisoners, officers, judging by their distinctive armor markings, toward a secure transport. The aliens towered over their human captors, yet moved with the defeated posture of those who knew their position was hopeless. "Survivors from their command ship," Lorne explained. "Intelligence will want to question them." Mira watched the prisoners pass, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. 6 days ago, the sight of even one Zyrev had inspired terror in the colonists. Now they were being marched away in restraints, their fearsome presence reduced to something almost pitiful. "What happens now?" she asked. "To the colony, I mean." "That's partly up to you," Lorne said. "The Alliance is establishing a permanent defense post in this system. The Zyrev attacked for a reason. Your Detonium deposits are valuable, and they won't be the last to try claiming them." He turned to face her directly. "We need experienced local leadership to coordinate with Alliance forces. Someone who knows the colony and has proven they can defend it." The implication was clear, and Mira felt the weight of new responsibility settling alongside her exhaustion. "I'm just a colonial security commander," she said. "Not a military officer." "You held off a Zyrev assault force for 6 days with minimal resources," Lorne countered. "That's more impressive than most of what I saw during my academy training." He smiled slightly. "Besides, titles can be adjusted. The Alliance needs people like you on the frontier. Commander Solon." Before Mira could respond, Jay approached, his young face transformed by a combination of exhaustion and elation. "Commander, General." He acknowledged them both. "The medical teams are requesting additional personnel for triage. And," he hesitated, "the civilians are gathering in the central plaza. They're asking to see you both." Mira exchanged a glance with Lorne. "We should go," she said. "They need to see that help is really here." As they made their way toward the central plaza, Mira observed the rapidly changing atmosphere of the settlement. Just hours ago, these same tunnels and corridors had been filled with desperate people preparing for a last stand. Now, despite the damage and the lingering fear, hope had returned. Vanguard personnel worked alongside colonists, distributing supplies and treating the wounded. Children who had been hidden in the deepest shelters were emerging, wide-eyed at the sight of the uniformed soldiers with their advanced equipment. The Central Plaza had once been the colony's main gathering place, with gardens and seating areas arranged around a central fountain. The gardens were trampled now, and the fountain dry, but the space was filling with colonists drawn by the news of rescue. They parted to create a path as Mira and General Lorne entered, a murmur of voices rising at the sight of the Vanguard officer. Mira felt suddenly self-conscious of her dirty uniform and exhausted appearance beside Lorne's immaculate presentation. But the looks on the colonists' faces, as they recognized her, contained nothing but respect and gratitude. An older woman stepped forward from the crowd, her lined face familiar to Mira from colony council meetings. Elise Nadari had been among the first settlers on Kalin 5, and her opinion carried significant weight. "Commander Solan," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed plaza. "You promised us you would keep broadcasting. You said help would come." Her eyes shifted to Lorne, taking in his uniform and rank insignia. "It seems you were right." A ripple of agreement moved through the gathering. Mira felt uncomfortable with the implied credit. "We all kept fighting," she said. "Every person who held a position, treated the wounded, maintained our systems. Everyone played a part in our survival." "But you gave us hope when there was none to be found," Elise insisted. "And now we need to know. What comes next?" Mira looked to Lorne, who stepped forward to address the crowd. His voice projected effortlessly, trained by years of command. "Citizens of Kalin 5, he began. "I am General Arik Lorne of the Human Vanguard. The Alliance has not forgotten you, despite your distance from the core worlds. What you have endured here, the courage you've shown in the face of overwhelming force, exemplifies the best of human spirit." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. "The Zyrev threat has been neutralized. Their blockade is destroyed. Their ground forces neutralized or captured. My ship, the Indomitable, will remain in orbit until a permanent defense platform can be established. Kalin 5 will not stand alone again." A cheer rose from the crowd, quickly swelling into sustained applause. Mira watched as relief and joy transformed faces that had shown only grim determination for days. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders to see the Alliance general, and even the wounded managed to join the celebration from their stretchers. "But this is not merely a rescue," Lorne continued when the noise subsided. "This is the beginning of a new chapter for your colony. The Alliance recognizes the strategic importance of Kalin 5, not just for its resources, but as a symbol of humanity's resilience on the frontier. We will rebuild, stronger than before, and you will have the full support of the Alliance in that effort." More cheers followed, and Mira found herself swept up in the collective emotion despite her exhaustion. She had spent 6 days maintaining a facade of confidence for these people, never allowing them to see her own doubts. Now, as help arrived in force, she could finally allow herself to feel the relief she had denied for so long. The celebration continued as Lorne outlined immediate recovery plans and introduced key Vanguard personnel who would coordinate the rebuilding efforts. Mira stood at his side, answering questions about the colony's specific needs and introducing local leaders who would work with the Alliance teams. As the formal briefing concluded and the gathering began to disperse, Talon approached, accompanied by a Vanguard officer whose insignia marked him as a chief engineer. "Commander," Talon said, his usual reserve giving way to undisguised excitement. "Chief Engineer Reyes has offered access to Vanguard power systems to restart our main grid. We could have full power restored within hours instead of days." The Vanguard engineer nodded. "Your infrastructure is largely intact, just disconnected from power sources. We can provide temporary generators while repairing the main systems." "Make it happen," Mira authorized. "Priority to medical facilities, then life support and communication systems." As they turned to leave, Mira noticed something odd in Talon's interaction with the Vanguard personnel, a familiarity that seemed out of place. "Talon," she called after him. "A moment, please." When the engineer returned, Mira studied his face carefully. "You know these people," she said. It wasn't a question. Talon hesitated, then sighed. "Not these specific individuals, but yes. I'm familiar with Vanguard protocols and systems." He glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. I served aboard the Vigilant for 7 years before retiring to civilian life. Flight engineer, specialized in propulsion systems. Mira stared at him in surprise. Talon had been with the colony for nearly 3 years, maintaining their modest infrastructure with impressive efficiency. But he'd never mentioned a military background, let alone service with the human vanguard's elite forces. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she asked. "Because I came here to leave that life behind," Talon answered simply. Kalen 5 was supposed to be a quiet posting, far from conflict zones. A wry smile crossed his weathered face. "That didn't quite work out as planned. Your experience proved invaluable," Mira acknowledged. "Especially with the communications array. You knew exactly what signal pattern would cut through the Zyrev jamming, didn't you?" Talon nodded. "Vanguard ships are programmed to detect certain emergency frequencies, even through interference. I gambled that the protocols hadn't changed too much since my service." "Some gamble," Mira said with newfound respect. "You saved 12,000 lives with that knowledge." "We all did our part." Talon echoed her earlier words. "Speaking of which, I should get back to the power grid restoration." He hesitated. "Unless you need me for something else." Mira shook her head. "Go. But Talon, thank you. For everything." As the engineer departed, General Lorne rejoined Mira. "Your people are remarkably resilient," he observed. "Already organizing repair teams, setting priorities. Most colonies would still be in shock after what you've been through." "Frontier settlements attract a certain type," Mira replied. "People who solve problems instead of waiting for others to solve them." She glanced at the general. "Though we're certainly grateful for the assistance when problems exceed our capabilities." Lorne nodded thoughtfully. "The frontier is changing, Commander. The days when colonies could exist in isolation, relying solely on their own resources, are ending. The Zyrev incursion here is part of a larger pattern. Non-human civilizations pushing into spaces humans have claimed, but not fully secured." "You're suggesting more attacks like this one?" Mira asked, concern tightening her voice. "I'm suggesting that Kalen 5 won't be the last colony tested," Lorne clarified. "Which is why the Alliance is establishing a more robust presence in frontier regions. We need forward bases, rapid response capabilities, and, most importantly, local leadership that understands both Alliance protocols and colonial realities." The conversation was interrupted by Jay's return. "Commander," he reported, "we've completed the sweep of the eastern tunnels. All Zyrev forces have been neutralized or captured. The EMP drones disabled their demolition charges before any significant structural damage occurred." "Good work, Private," Mira acknowledged. "What about civilian casualties?" 3 dead from the final assault," Jay said, his young face solemn. 14 wounded. But the Vanguard medical teams are treating them now." He straightened his posture, making a visible effort to deliver his report professionally, despite his exhaustion. "Total casualties for the siege stand at 72 dead, 341 wounded, seriously enough to require medical attention." The numbers hit Mira hard. Each death represented a person she had sworn to protect, a failure despite their ultimate survival. Yet, she knew the toll could have been much worse without the determined resistance they had mounted. "Thank you, Jay," she said quietly. "Get some rest now. That's an order." The young private hesitated. "Ma'am, I'd prefer to continue assisting with recovery operations." Mira recognized the need in his eyes, the desire to keep moving, to stay useful, to outrun the emotional impact of what they had all endured. 4 hours of rest, she compromised. "Then report to Sector 7 for assignment. We need alert personnel, not exhausted ones." Jay nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Commander." He glanced at General Lorne and offered a crisp salute before departing. "Good soldier," Lorne observed. "He's 22, Mira said. Joined Colonial Security to pay for advanced education. Now he's a veteran of one of the worst sieges in recent colonial history, she sighed. None of them signed up for this. Few ever do, Lorne replied. War has a way of finding people regardless of their plans. He checked a notification on his communication device. My senior staff has prepared preliminary reconstruction proposals. Would you like to review them? Mira nodded, grateful for the return to practical matters. Lead the way, General. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Mira moved through the settlement, coordinating between colonial needs and Vanguard resources, authorizing emergency repairs, and checking on the wounded. The Vanguard medical teams worked miracles with their advanced equipment, stabilizing the most critical cases and beginning regenerative treatments that the colony's modest medical facilities could never have provided. Power was restored to the main grid, bringing light back to sections that had been dark for days. The atmospheric shields were reinforced, and preliminary repairs began on the most damaged structures. Throughout it all, Mira pushed herself beyond exhaustion, fueled by a combination of responsibility and the strange energizing effect of hope restored. It was nearly midnight, local time, when General Lorne found her inspecting repairs to the water reclamation system. Commander, he said, his tone brooking no argument. You've been on duty for over 30 hours straight, even with stims. That's beyond reasonable limits. Mira started to protest, then recognized the wisdom in his words. Her thoughts had begun to fragment, and her reaction time was noticeably slowed. You're right, she conceded. I should rest. The Indomitable has guest quarters prepared, Lorne offered. More comfortable than anything available here at present. Mira shook her head. I appreciate the offer, General, but my place is here with my people. She managed a tired smile. Besides, I'm not sure I'm ready to leave solid ground just yet, even for a night. Lorne nodded in understanding. Very well. I've taken the liberty of having quarters prepared in the administrative building. It survived relatively intact, and power has been fully restored there. Too exhausted to argue further, Mira allowed herself to be escorted to the designated quarters. The room was simple, but clean, with a real bed instead of the emergency cots that had been her only option for nearly a week. More importantly, it had a functioning shower with actual hot water, a luxury she had almost forgotten. Rest well, Commander, Lorne said as he left her at the door. We have much to discuss tomorrow. Alone, at last. Mira moved through the room mechanically, removing her dirt-encrusted uniform and stepping into the shower. As the hot water washed away days of grime and sweat, she finally allowed herself to process what had happened. They had survived. Against all probability, against overwhelming force, they had held out long enough for help to arrive. The colony would rebuild. Her people would live. The emotional impact hit her, all at once. And Mira leaned against the shower wall as tears mixed with the streaming water. She cried for the dead, for the wounded, for the innocents lost as a peaceful mining colony was transformed into a battlefield. She cried for the weight of command and the constant fear she had suppressed for the sake of others. Most of all, she cried with relief that it was over. When the tears subsided, Mira finished her shower and dressed in the clean clothes that had been provided. Despite her exhaustion, she found herself drawn to the window, where she could see the central plaza below. Even at this late hour, activity continued as Vanguard personnel and colonists worked together to restore essential services. And above it all, visible through the atmospheric shield, hung the massive silhouette of the Indomitable, a promise of protection that Mira had never dared hope for during the darkest hours of the siege. They came, she whispered to herself, echoing Jay's words from earlier. Someone actually came. With that thought providing comfort, Mira finally surrendered to exhaustion, falling into the first truly restful sleep she had experienced in what felt like a lifetime. Morning arrived with the distinctive copper-tinted light of Kalin 5's sun filtering through the atmospheric shields. Mira woke feeling remarkably refreshed. The accumulated fatigue of the siege partially dispelled by 8 solid hours of uninterrupted sleep. After a quick breakfast from the ration packs provided in her quarters, she dressed in the fresh uniform that had somehow appeared during the night and made her way to the command center. The difference from just 24 hours earlier was striking. Where before the center had been operating on emergency power with skeletal staffing, now it hummed with activity. Vanguard technicians worked alongside colonial personnel, upgrading systems and restoring functionality to damaged equipment. The main display showed a comprehensive overview of the settlement, with repair priorities clearly marked and teams assigned. Talon spotted her entrance and approached, looking remarkably rested himself. "Commander," he greeted her. "You'll be pleased to know the communications array is fully operational again. We've established direct links with Alliance headquarters and 3 neighboring systems." "Good work," Mira acknowledged. "What about the shield generators?" "Operating at 97% capacity," Talon reported. "The Vanguard engineers provided replacement components for the damaged sections. We should have full capacity by midday." Mira nodded, surveying the busy command center. "And our visitors?" "General Lorne requested a meeting with you once you were available," Talon said. "He's in the conference room with his senior staff, reviewing security protocols for the permanent defense installation." "Thank you, Talon," Mira said, then added more quietly. "Are you planning to tell the others about your Vanguard background?" The engineer shrugged. "It doesn't seem relevant now. I'm still just the colony's chief engineer." "With some very useful experience," Mira pointed out. "Experience that saved us all." Talon looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what needed doing, same as everyone." He gestured toward the conference room. "You shouldn't keep the general waiting." Mira let the subject drop, making her way to the indicated room. Inside, she found General Lorne with 3 senior Vanguard officers gathered around a holographic display of the Kalin 5 system. They looked up as she entered, and Lorne gestured her forward. "Commander Solon, good morning," he greeted her. "I trust you rested well?" "Better than I have in a week," Mira admitted. "Thank you for the accommodations." Lorne made brief introductions. Commander Vega, Chief of Security Operations, Dr. Eliza Kwan, Head of Medical Services, and Colonel Jen Martinez, in charge of defense systems. Each nodded respectfully to Mira, acknowledging her as a peer rather than a civilian administrator. "We were just discussing the placement of the permanent defense platform," Lorne explained, indicating the holographic display where a orbital structure was positioned at a key point in the system. "Standard Alliance protocol for frontier defense. It will provide early warning of any approaching vessels and maintain a squadron of rapid response fighters." Mira studied the proposed installation with interest. "That's significantly more protection than we ever expected." Kalin 5 was established as a commercial venture, not a military outpost. "Circumstances change," Colonel Martinez said. "The Zyrev attack has elevated this system's strategic importance. Your Detonium deposits are valuable, certainly, but the real asset here is the psychological impact of what happened and what follows." "I don't understand," Mira admitted. "The story of Kalin 5, Lorne explained. A remote human colony under siege by superior forces, broadcasting a desperate call for help across the void, and the Alliance answering that call with overwhelming force. That narrative will spread across both human and non-human space." "You're saying we're being made into a symbol?" Mira realized. "You already are one," Commander Vega corrected. "The communications chatter we've intercepted from neighboring systems indicates the Zyrev defeat here is being discussed on every frontier world. The message is clear. The Alliance protects its people, no matter how distant." Mira considered this new perspective. She had been focused entirely on the immediate survival of her colony. never considering the broader implications of their resistance and rescue. So the defense platform isn't just for our protection, she concluded. It's a statement. It's both, Lorne said. Kalin 5 will be secured against future attacks. But yes, the visible Alliance presence here serves a larger strategic purpose: deterrence through demonstrated commitment. The discussion continued, covering details of the defense platform's capabilities and the timeline for its construction. Mira found herself impressed by the thoroughness of the Vanguard planning. They had developed a comprehensive security strategy for Kalin 5 in less than a day. "There's one other matter we need to address," Lorne said as the technical briefing concluded. "The question of local command structure. The defense platform will have its own Vanguard personnel, but we need effective integration with colonial leadership." Mira nodded, sensing where this was leading. "You mentioned yesterday that the Alliance needs people who understand both military and colonial perspectives." "I did," Lorne confirmed. "And I've been authorized to offer you a commission in the Human Vanguard, with assignment as Kalin 5's defense coordinator. You would retain your civil authority, while gaining access to Alliance resources and direct command of certain defensive assets." The offer caught Mira by surprise despite the hints Lorne had dropped earlier. "A Vanguard commission? I have no formal military training, General." "You held off a Zyrev assault force for 6 days with minimal resources and untrained personnel," Colonel Martinez said bluntly. "That's worth more than any academy credentials. We can provide the procedural training you need. What can't be taught is the judgment you've already demonstrated." Mira glanced around the table, noting the respectful expressions on the faces of these career military officers. They weren't humoring her or fulfilling a political directive. They genuinely valued what she had accomplished. "The commission comes with access to Alliance intelligence networks, priority supply chains, and direct communication channels to Vanguard Command," Lorne added. "Resources that would benefit Kalin 5 significantly during rebuilding." "I need to consider this carefully," Mira said. "My first responsibility is to the colony and its people." "Of course," Lorne agreed. "This isn't a decision to be made hastily, but I would point out that accepting the commission would enhance your ability to fulfill that responsibility, not diminish it." The meeting concluded shortly after, with arrangements made for Mira to tour the Indomitable later that day. As she left the conference room, her mind churned with the implications of Lorne's offer. A Vanguard commission would fundamentally change her role in the colony, transforming her from a local security administrator to an Alliance military officer with significantly broader authority. She was still pondering this when she encountered Jay in the corridor outside. The young private snapped to attention, but Mira noticed a new confidence in his bearing that hadn't been there before the siege. "At ease, Private," she said. "How are the recovery operations in Sector 7? "Proceeding ahead of schedule, Commander," Jay reported. "The Vanguard engineering teams have equipment that makes our tools look prehistoric. They're clearing debris and reinforcing damaged structures in hours instead of days." Mira nodded, pleased by the progress. "And the civilians?" "Morale is high," Jay said. "Having the Indomitable visible overhead has made a huge difference. People feel safe for the first time in a week." He hesitated, then added, "There's talk about you joining the Vanguard." News traveled fast in a small colony, especially one experiencing such dramatic changes. "Nothing's been decided," Mira said carefully. "It's a significant step that requires consideration." "The security team would support it," Jay said with surprising certainty. "We all would. After what happened, having a direct line to Alliance resources would mean everything for the colony's future." Mira studied the young man, noting how the past week had accelerated his maturity. Like everyone in the colony, Jay had been forced to confront mortality and make difficult choices under extreme pressure. The experience had transformed him, as it had transformed them all. "I appreciate the vote of confidence," she said. "I'll take it into account." As Jay continued on his duties, Mira made her way to the medical center established in what had once been the colony's community hall. The large open space had been efficiently divided into treatment areas, with Vanguard medical technology supplementing the colony's limited equipment. Dr. Kwan was overseeing the treatment of burn victims from the Eastern Tunnel fighting, her movements precise and confident as she adjusted settings on a regeneration unit. She looked up as Mira approached. "Commander," she greeted her. "Come to check on your people." Mira nodded. "How are they doing?" "Better than they have any right to be, given the limited care available during the siege," Dr. Kwan said frankly. "Your medical staff performed admirably with what they had. We're seeing remarkable recovery rates now that we can provide proper treatment." She led Mira through the treatment areas, providing updates on specific cases. The most severely wounded had been transferred to the Indomitable's advanced medical bay, but the majority remained planetside, receiving care that still far exceeded the colony's normal capabilities. "We'll be leaving most of this equipment when we establish the permanent medical facility," Dr. Kwan explained, "and training your staff in its use. Of course, General Lorne has authorized a comprehensive medical upgrade for Kalen 5 as part of the reconstruction package." "That's extremely generous," Mira said, somewhat overwhelmed by the scale of the Alliance commitment to what had previously been a modestly supported outpost. Dr. Kwan's expression grew serious. "The Alliance has learned harsh lessons about frontier medicine, Commander. Too many colonies have been established with minimal medical infrastructure, then left to fend for themselves when emergencies arise. The new directive is to ensure that every human settlement, regardless of size or commercial importance, has healthcare capabilities proportionate to potential threats." "Potential threats like the Zyrev," Mira concluded. "Among others," Dr. Kwan confirmed. "The galaxy is becoming increasingly competitive as multiple species expand into previously unclaimed regions. Ensuring human populations can survive and recover from conflict is now considered a strategic imperative." The doctor's clinical assessment reinforced what General Lorne and his staff had implied, that Kalen 5's experience represented a turning point in Alliance frontier policy. The colony had become a test case for a more robust approach to human expansion, one that balanced commercial interests with military readiness. After completing her tour of the medical facility, Mira received word that a shuttle was prepared to transport her to the Indomitable. She found Talon waiting at the landing pad, his expression suggesting he had something important to discuss. "Coming to see me off?" she asked as she approached. "Actually, I've been invited aboard as well," Talon said. "General Lorne requested my input on integrating Vanguard systems with colonial infrastructure." He hesitated. "There's something you should know before we go up there." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Another revelation from your mysterious past?" Talon managed a small smile. "Nothing that dramatic. But I've been reviewing the Indomitable's technical specifications. This isn't just any Vanguard vessel. Commander, it's a Sentinel-class deep reconnaissance warship, one of only 7 in the entire fleet. They don't deploy these ships for routine missions, even emergency responses." "What are you saying?" Mira asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "I'm saying that the Alliance sent their most advanced warship to rescue a mining colony on the edge of nowhere," Talon said quietly. "That's unprecedented. Sentinel-class vessels are typically reserved for high-priority missions in contested space, not humanitarian operations." This new information added another layer to Mira's growing suspicion that there was more to the Vanguard's appearance than simple response to a distress call. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying them toward the massive warship in orbit, she resolved to seek clearer answers from General Lorne. The Indomitable grew larger as they approached, its true scale becoming apparent only as their shuttle maneuvered toward one of its docking bays. The vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, over 1 kilometer in length, with a sleek, predatory profile that emphasized function over aesthetics. Weapon emplacements were visible along its hull, alongside sensor arrays and communication dishes of advanced design. "Impressive, isn't she?" the shuttle pilot commented as he guided them toward the designated landing bay. "Newest ship in the fleet. This is her first deployment since commissioning." Mira exchanged a meaningful glance with Talon. A brand-new Sentinel-class warship, on its first mission, sent to rescue Kalen 5? The coincidence stretched credibility. The shuttle docked smoothly, and Mira and Talon were greeted by a Vanguard lieutenant who escorted them through the ship's immaculate corridors. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, acknowledging their presence with respectful nods as they passed. They were led to a conference room adjacent to the bridge, where General Lorne awaited them, along with several senior officers Mira hadn't met previously. The general rose as they entered, gesturing them to seats at the polished table. "Commander Solon, Engineer Corps, welcome aboard the Indomitable," he said. "I hope you'll forgive the somewhat rushed tour arrangements. We have a tight schedule to maintain if we're to complete the defense platform installation within our operational window." "About that, General," Mira said. Deciding directness was the best approach. "Engineer Corps has informed me that the Indomitable is a Sentinel-class vessel, one of the most advanced and rare ships in the Vanguard fleet. That seems like an excessive response to a mining colony's distress call." A brief silence followed her statement. Lorne studied her with new appreciation before responding. "Observant and direct. Those are valuable qualities, Commander." He nodded to one of his officers, who activated a holographic display above the conference table. "The Indomitable was already en route to this sector when your distress call was detected," Lorne explained, as the display showed a navigational chart of surrounding space. "We were conducting a strategic assessment of frontier vulnerabilities, following intelligence reports of increased Zyrev activity." The display highlighted several star systems near Kalen 5, marking them with pulsing red indicators. "Your colony wasn't the first target, merely the most recent in a pattern of escalating Zyrev aggression along the expansion corridor. The difference is that previous attacks focused on automated mining operations or scientific outposts with minimal human presence. So, the attack on Kalen 5 represented a significant escalation," Talon observed. "They went from targeting infrastructure to targeting a populated colony." "Precisely," Lorne confirmed. "That shift in strategy triggered a corresponding change in our response protocols. The Indomitable was dispatched to investigate the pattern and develop countermeasures. Your distress call reached us just as we entered the sector." Mira processed this new information. "So our rescue was convenient timing?" "I would call it fortuitous rather than convenient," Lorne corrected. "But, yes, had the Zyrev attacked a week earlier or later, the outcome might have been very different. However, that doesn't diminish the significance of what happened here." He manipulated the holographic display, expanding it to show a broader view of human-controlled space. "The Alliance has been reactive in its frontier defense strategy for too long, responding to threats only after they materialize. What happened at Kalen 5 has accelerated a policy shift that was already underway, toward proactive security measures for all human settlements, regardless of size or commercial importance." One of the officers, a stern-faced woman with commander's insignia, spoke up. "The Zyrev miscalculated badly here. They assumed a remote mining colony would be sacrificed in the greater calculus of Alliance resource allocation. By proving that assumption wrong, we've sent a powerful message to all potential aggressors. And to other human colonies," Talon added thoughtfully. "The knowledge that the Alliance will respond with overwhelming force to protect even its most distant outposts. That changes everything for frontier settlements." Lorne nodded. "Which brings us back to the matter of your commission. Commander Solon, Kalen 5 will become a demonstration of the new frontier defense doctrine, not just through the physical presence of the defense platform, but through leadership that bridges military and colonial perspectives. Mira considered her position carefully. The broader context Lorne had provided clarified the stakes involved. This wasn't simply about her colony anymore. It was about establishing a new relationship between the Alliance and its frontier settlements. One that offered greater protection, but likely came with increased oversight as well. "If I accept this commission," she said slowly, "what guarantees do I have regarding colonial autonomy?" Kalin 5 was established as a commercial venture with minimal Alliance involvement. The colonists value their independence. "A fair concern," Lorne acknowledged. "The commission would place you in a unique dual role, serving both the colony's interests and Alliance security objectives. When those interests align, as they do in matters of defense against external threats, there's no conflict. Where they might diverge, you would be positioned to negotiate solutions that respect colonial autonomy while addressing legitimate security concerns." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Think of it less as Alliance imposing control and more as providing you with additional leverage to protect your people's interests. A commissioned officer has standing to request resources, raise concerns, and influence policy in ways a civilian administrator simply doesn't." Mira glanced at Talon, who had remained unusually quiet during this exchange. The engineer met her gaze with a slight nod, his silent endorsement of Lorne's perspective carrying significant weight given his own Vanguard background. "I'll need to discuss this with the Colony Council," Mira said finally. "While I appreciate the strategic benefits, any fundamental change to our relationship with the Alliance should involve broader consultation." "Of course," Lorne agreed readily. "We anticipated that response. In fact, we've arranged for colony representatives to tour the Indomitable tomorrow, followed by a formal presentation of the defense platform proposal. Your people deserve to understand exactly what's being offered before any decisions are made." The remainder of the ship tour proceeded smoothly, with Mira and Talon shown key systems and facilities that would interface with the planned defense platform. The Indomitable's technology was indeed impressive, generations beyond the modest equipment available on Kalin 5. The engineering teams explained how scaled-down versions of these systems would be integrated into the colony's infrastructure, providing significant upgrades to everything from power generation to communications. As they prepared to return to the surface, General Lorne took Mira aside for a final private word. "Whatever you decide about the Commission, Commander, know that the Alliance's commitment to Kalin 5 security is absolute. The defense platform will be constructed, and your colony will be protected." "Then why push for my involvement?" Mira asked directly. Lorne smiled slightly. "Because defending people is about more than placing ships in orbit or guns on the ground. It's about understanding their needs, their fears, their aspirations. You've demonstrated that understanding in ways that impress even veteran Vanguard officers. That kind of leadership can't be manufactured or imported. It has to be cultivated where it already exists." He extended his hand. "Think about it, Commander. Not just for Kalin 5, but for what it represents. A new model of frontier security built on partnership rather than imposition." Mira accepted the handshake, still uncertain, but increasingly convinced of Lorne's sincerity. "I will, General. And thank you for the rescue, for the support, for everything." "That's what the Alliance is supposed to be," Lorne said simply. "Not just a political entity or a military force, but a promise that humanity stands together, even across the void between stars." As their shuttle descended toward the surface of Kalin 5, Mira watched the Indomitable recede in the viewport. Its massive form, now a symbol of protection, rather than an object of desperate hope. Whatever she decided about her own future, the colony's survival was assured, not just in the immediate aftermath of the Zyrev attack, but for the foreseeable future. The settlement came into view below them, already transformed from the desperate last stand of yesterday into a hive of reconstruction activity. Vanguard shuttles and colonial vehicles moved between work sites, while temporary structures rose to replace damaged buildings. The signs of battle remained visible, but they were being steadily erased by the combined efforts of colonists and their unexpected saviors. "You know," Talon said quietly beside her, "when I left the Vanguard, I thought I was leaving that life behind forever. I came to Kalen 5 looking for anonymity, for a place where my biggest concerns would be power fluctuations and equipment maintenance." He shook his head ruefully. "Instead, I found myself in the middle of a pivotal moment in Alliance history." "Regrets?" Mira asked. "None," Talon said with surprising certainty. "I've seen both sides now. The military precision of the Vanguard and the stubborn resilience of colonists. Both have their strengths, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Bringing them together, finding the balance between security and freedom, structure and adaptability, that's a worthy challenge." As the shuttle touched down on the landing pad, Mira saw a small crowd had gathered to meet them. Elise Nadari stood at the front, along with other members of the Colony Council. Behind them, a mixture of colonists and Vanguard personnel worked side by side, united by the shared goal of rebuilding what had so nearly been lost. "It is a worthy challenge," Mira agreed, rising from her seat as the shuttle's ramp extended. "And maybe that's reason enough to accept it." She stepped out into the copper-tinted sunlight of Kalen 5, ready to face whatever came next, not alone, as she had feared during the darkest hours of the siege, but supported by an alliance that had proven its worth when it mattered most. Above them, visible through the atmospheric shield, the Indomitable maintained its vigilant orbit, a promise made manifest, a reminder that even at the edge of human expansion, no colony stood truly alone. Help had come roaring from the void when hope seemed lost, and with it, the certainty that humanity's reach into the stars would continue, protected not just by weapons and walls, but by the unbreakable commitment to answer every call for aid, no matter how distant. For Mira Solon and the people of Kalen 5, that commitment had made all the difference between extinction and survival, between defeat and the promise of a new beginning. And in the end, wasn't that what the human spirit had always been about? Not just enduring, but thriving. Not just calling into the darkness, but knowing that somewhere, someone was listening, ready to answer. The void between stars was vast and cold, but humanity had conquered it, not through technology alone, but through something far more powerful: the refusal to abandon their own, no matter the distance, no matter the odds. On Kalen 5, that refusal had manifested as a warship appearing when all seemed lost, a reminder that even at the farthest reaches of human expansion, the oldest promise still held true: no one would be left behind.